The New Babylon, Chapter 13. Kevin and Sarah cleared Brooklyn by dawn and could see Liberty Island off in the distance. Kevin surveyed the area with his binoculars, scanning back and forth several times. He lowered them and looked at his wife. "It looks clear, honey." According to some intel Jason was able to pick up, the ferry's running twice a day. "I see it docked over there." He pointed toward the water at about 1 o'clock. "I'm going to take just enough silver with me to barter the ride and hopefully the radio, if they'll part with it." He looked at his wife with a concerned look. He pulled out the pouch from his coat that held the silver rounds. He counted out several pieces and placed them inside his sock, tucked down behind the ankle strap on his boot, and gave the pouch with the remaining silver in it to his wife. According to Jason, the first ferry crosses at 11, the second just before dusk at 1700. Now, I think it's a little optimistic to think I'll be able to get back by this afternoon, honey, but I should be able to get back by 1100 tomorrow without any problem. When you see me walking back from the ferry, if I'm alone, then just sit tight and wait for me. If there's anyone with me or following me, then I need you to leave right away. If they send someone with me, I don't want you to be here when we arrive." He reached out, took hold of his wife's arm. "Honey, if for whatever reason I'm not back by tomorrow, I need you to get out of here. Wait till the afternoon ferry crosses, and if I'm not on it, then sit tight and leave the next morning at first light. You can't travel through Brooklyn at night, so it has to be first light. If we don't return by tomorrow night, Jason has orders to come for you. Don't wait for him. Travel back the exact same route we took to get here. You should run into him along the way. Honey, we picked this spot because it's concealed, and it has a good vantage point of the docks and the island beyond. It's also set up well tactically. There's only one way in, and that choke point is at the door, which makes it easily defendable. The room they were in was a boiler room to an old factory. It had only one iron door and a ventilation port which had iron bars covering it, which overlooked the docks. The room had no other windows and was made of concrete and brick. Honey, listen to me. I need to know that no matter what, if I don't get back on time, you'll head back to the church." She looked at him and nodded softly. "Yes, Kevin," she answered. He nodded back at her and pulled her close to him. "Don't worry, baby, I'll be back." She smiled as she pulled back and responded, "Yeah, so will a bad check." Kevin smiled back at her. He picked up the 12 gauge and handed it to her. He set the AR-15 against the wall under the vent opening across from the door. "You know the signal, baby. That door opens without you hearing it. You shoot whatever comes through it. Shoot, move, just like we trained." Sarah nodded and kissed her husband goodbye. "Be careful, baby. Love you." Kevin turned and paused before walking out the door. "Love you more," he said with a smile. Once outside, he heard the iron bolt being slipped through the receiver hole on the steel door frame. Back in Pennsylvania, about a mile up the interstate from where Will and the kids saw the trucks earlier, they sat quietly just inside the tree line. When Will was sure it was safe, he waved the kids up to his position. He told them he would cross and pointed to a culvert running alongside the highway on the other side. "When I reach that culvert, you two follow quickly behind me. We're going to get down into that culvert and walk west. It'll give us adequate concealment should another patrol come by. Once we get down to where that rock face rises up, you'll start to head up along the side, following the slow, steady rise." He pointed to the hill on the other side of the rock face, several hundred yards down the highway. "From there, we'll make our way up to the top and regroup. That should be a good place to rest for a bit before continuing on. We can plot our course from there." He looked at both his kids, and they each nodded to let him know they understood the plan. "You both are doing great. Hopefully it won't be much longer till we get to Arby's." Will smiled, and they returned the smile. He looked around and gave them the order to cross. Will crossed first, followed by Lindsay and Will Jr. in the rear. Once they made it safely to the other side, they walked down along the culvert off the side of the road. It was below grade, and Will knew that it would offer adequate concealment from the roadway. The road that cut off toward Arby's house was, by Will's estimation, approximately 4 or 5 miles up the interstate. His plan was to use the culvert until they made it past the sheer cliffs, about a quarter mile. Then he would lead the kids up the bank and into the tree line for greater concealment, plenty of opportunity for cover should they need it. Walking along the road, even with the concealment that the culvert offered, made Will uneasy. He knew if a problem arose while they walked past the cliffs, there would be nowhere for them to go at a moment's notice that would be safe. He felt exposed and vulnerable, a position he wasn't used to being in and one he did not like. "Let's double time it, kids," he said anxiously. "The sooner we get off this road, the better," he thought quietly to himself. About 2 miles down the road from Arby's cabin, Bryce and Bear sat on a ridge adjacent to the dirt road. They monitored radio for ham traffic. Bart had rigged up a makeshift antenna by throwing a hammer with a 550 cord attached to it into a pine tree. As the hammer cleared the highest branch he could reach and fell back to the ground, he tied an antenna he made out of some lengths of old TV antenna wire onto the cord and pulled it up into the tree. He secured the cord to keep the antenna in place and wired it to the radio. It worked relatively well, and from the ground it was not noticeable at all, unless someone was directly upon it and knew it was there. Bart used a mathematical formula to calculate the length of wire that the antenna needed to be to receive the exact frequency that he knew Will would be using. The radio was a handheld Baofeng. Standing alone would only transmit and receive line-of-sight communications up to a maximum range of approximately a mile or two. By putting the station high on the ridge and attaching the radio to the homemade antenna in the tree, Bart was confident he could increase that functional distance considerably. Bryce was becoming extremely concerned that Will and the kids had not yet arrived, and even though he did his best not to show that concern, he couldn't hide it from his wife. She pulled radio duty with him and walked up to him and handed him a cup of hot coffee. Strong and black, just the way he liked it. She placed her hand on his shoulder and just smiled when he looked at her. He returned the smile and looked off over the distant mountain. "Thanks, hon." She rubbed his shoulder and down his back with her hand, but said nothing. She was worried too. Bryce had changed the protocol to include 24/7 watch at the radio station. Bart had several battery packs for the radios, and a fresh one went out with every shift change. The mate to the radio was plugged into the house power at Arby's. The power company was operating on emergency level power protocols now, and a very rural area where Arby's cabin was located only received power from the grid 3 hours a day, and the use of air conditioning and other non-essential loads were prohibited. Arby had a very small 300-watt solar array on the roof with two 12-volt deep cycle batteries. Between that and the few daily hours of grid power, the group was able to keep the radios and batteries charged, as well as a couple LED lanterns powered up. They also used oil lamps and used a rocket stove made from cinder blocks to cook on. It took very little wood and was extremely efficient. Soon, it would be cold enough to use the antique wood cook stove in the kitchen, which would, along with another wood stove in the main room, heat the entire cabin. Arby had been prepping for a couple years. It was Bryce who convinced him of the need to prep after the two met a few years back. Arby had installed the stainless steel simple pump on his well outside. It allowed him to draw water from the well and to back charge the well tank in his crawl space without the need for power. He also had two 275-gallon IBC totes, which he previously had configured to collect rainwater from his gutter system. Since the power cut back to 3 hours a day, he filled those with a hose from his well during that 3-hour period and used it throughout the day for drinking water and personal hygiene. If and when they ran short, they switched to the simple pump to manually pump the water, a system that proved very reliable and almost to the point of being seamless. During the summer months, they also did all the garden watering during this 3-hour window of time when they had grid power. Sitting on the ridge at the radio station, Bryce stared at the radio. Save a few random transmissions from a distant unknown source, the radio was silent. Whenever it was time for the next shift to ascend the trail up toward the radio position, they keyed the mic on the radio that they carried once to alert the team on duty that they were approaching. Just then, the radio squawked to life. "Randy, do you copy? Randy!" Then a short pause, and then the response. "Team leader to Scout. I hear you, Scout. Did I tell you about how to call out over the radio?" Team leader 10-4. We got us some activity down here. John came across a sheriff's car, just sitting here in a parking lot with nobody around. We was able to hotwire it. It's got a shotgun locked to the dash, and we busted into the trunk. There's an AR-15 and a bunch of ammo. Copy?" Another short pause. "Copy, Scout. Did you need to broadcast all that over the radio? And who told you to steal a sheriff's car? I swear, the two of you don't have one working brain between you. Leave the cruiser and get going out toward the interstate like I told you to do before you left. Follow the darn plan. That's an order. You copy me?" "Yeah, we hear you, Randy." "Well, we figure we're going to head down that dirt access road that leads down the backside of the reservoir. We smelled smoke. There might be someone down there in one of them cabins. We're going to check it out." Bryce looked at Bear. "Sounds like they're heading our way." "Negative. I repeat, negative. Head out to the interstate as planned. Don't make me tell you again." "Or what? What you gonna do, Randy? We're sick of taking orders from you. Who made you boss anyway? We're fixing to find us one of them cabins that has firewood in it, maybe even some food. We're gonna make a fire and relax for the night. Maybe tomorrow we'll just go on our own way. We got us a new car, guns, ammo, everything we need. That old truck you gave us kept overheating. It don't make no sense to leave this good car behind. Maybe we ain't gonna be your errand boys no more, Randy. What you think about that?" "I think maybe I'll live longer without you two morons attached to my back dragging me underwater. Maybe you better tell me your plans for the night again. There might be someone listening somewhere in this county that didn't quite catch where you're going. Now, I'm going to give you morons one last chance. So listen good. Tomorrow, I'm going to be at Rally Point Delta. And if you two aren't there by 0900, that's 9 a.m. translated in idiot. If you're not there by then I better never see either of you again. Randy shut off his radio. The two men in the sheriff's car just laughed at each other and drove down toward the dirt road. Bryce was already on his feet and geared up. He looked at his wife. Babe, stay put here and monitor the radio. No matter what, don't break radio silence unless you hear from Will. I seriously doubt these guys can triangulate your position, but don't take any chances. I'm going to double time it back to Arby's to warn the team and get ready for these guys in case they make it there. You got concealment up here. No fire tonight to be safe. I'll be back as soon as I can. Bryce always insisted his wife do a gear check with him prior to going out on radio watch. He knew she had her Glock 19 and plenty of ammo for her 12-gauge Mossberg. He reached into the pouch on his vest and produced 2 more 17-round mags of 9mm and handed them to her. Then he unslung his AR from his shoulder and set it down against a tree next to where she was sitting. He then reached into his pouch and took out 2 mags for it and gave them to her as well. She frowned and looked at his belt where his .45 sat tucked away. He smiled at her and said, "Don't worry, I've got my .45, and there's another rifle back at the cabin. You won't need these, but I'll feel better knowing you have them. I'll be back as soon as I can. I have to run now, babe." He leaned in and kissed his wife. She called out after him as he descended the trail, "You be careful, big man. If you die, I'm going to kill you." Bryce grinned as he jogged away. "Roger that, babe," he said.